unobtrusive research. Unobtrusive research refers to ways that we can study social behavior without actually affecting it. So Durkheim did this analysis of suicide, and it did nothing to affect suicides one way or another. So unobtrusive research could be qualitative or quantitative. I'm going to talk about 4 kinds. Content analysis, looking at existing statistics or secondary analysis, comparative and historical analysis, and unobtrusive online research. So a content analysis is a systematic study of some type of recorded human communication. It could be books, it could be laws, paintings, websites. So in the past, I've done a couple of studies where I looked at serial killer documentaries or song lyrics. Okay, so what we're going to do is then we have to decide on our key variables and how we're going to define them. Then we have to think about what we're going to watch, read, listen to, and the time frame. And then we're going to analyze that collected data. So a content analysis requires a handling of the what, an analysis of the data collected, and why and with what effect. So we're going to start by picking our unit of analysis. Maybe we want to look at how children's literature portrays gender roles. Maybe we want to look at portrayals of drugs and alcohol in popular film. Maybe we want to look at how sociology textbooks have defined race. So generally we can use any of the sampling techniques we already learned about in chapter 7. You could, do a random sample. You can do a purposive sample, whatever you want. But then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to coding. Okay, so first we want to establish our universe. What's the subject area we want to study? Then our unit of analysis. Is it going to be films, books, websites, whatever? Then we're going to pick our sampling frame, and then we're going to actually sample. So once we have our sample, we're going to analyze whatever it is we're looking at. So let's say news articles, okay? And we're going to code them according to some conceptual framework. So coding is the process by which we take raw data and transform it into a standard form suitable for analysis. Now we can look at manifest content, the very visible surface content, right? And this would be like using a closed-ended survey question. Or we can look at latent content, what's the underlying meaning? So for example, we could have looked at editorials in a newspaper, right? And maybe we have evaluated them as whether or not we think they're on a scale of 1 to 5 from very liberal to very conservative. We might, code them to see if they're isolationists, if they're pro-UN, if they're anti-UN. And we might do this by newspaper. So when we're coding, we want to remember that we have an operational definition of our variables and that they have mutually exclusive and exhaustive attributes. We want to pre-test that coding scheme, right? So we want to maybe pick a couple of the things that we're going to code, have our coders code them, and then check them against each other to see if people are coding the same way. We call that an intercoder reliability test. Now in 1895, Ida B. Wells examined newspaper articles on 728 lynchings reported during the previous 10 years. She wanted to test the widely held assumption that black men were being lynched in the South primarily for raping white women. And only in 1/3 of the cases were the victims even accused of rape, let alone proven guilty of rape. They were primarily charged with being insolent, not staying, quote, in their place. In 1998, Chermak did a sample of crime stories from every 5th day in the first 6 months of 1990, resulting in 1,557 stories. He wanted to see how content determines how much space a story gets and where it's placed. So how many inches of coverage, where the stories were placed, size of the headlines. He also coded for the offense type, the number of crimes, weapon usage, location, offender-victim characteristics. Thompson and Hanniger in 2001 sampled 55 E-rated games. They had an experienced undergraduate gamer play each game for 90 minutes or until the game reached a natural conclusion. Each experienced gamer or researcher and undergrad gamer reviewed the videotape of the gaming session, and they coded for number of violent incidents, number of deaths, drugs, alcohol or tobacco use, profanity and sexual behavior, weapon use, and explicit music. Some other researchers have looked at gang-related homicides. So in 1999, Rosenfeld, Bray, and Egley looked at how different gang membership might facilitate homicide in different ways. So they looked at police case files for homicides in St. Louis over a 10-year period. They broke these down to gang-motivated killings and gang-affiliated killings, homicides. Defining gang-motivated killings as resulting from gang behavior or relationships, such as an initiation, throwing of gang signs or a gang fight, or gang-affiliated homicide. So they involved a gang member as a victim or offender, but it didn't look to be gang-motivated. Now, content analysis has quite a few strengths. It's economical in terms of time and money. It allows us to correct errors. If as we start coding, we realize there's something wrong with our coding, we can fix it, we can go back, we can change it. It allows us to look at things occurring over time, right? So we could look at how has the amount of violence in video games changed over time. It doesn't really impact the research subjects, and it's pretty reliable. It is, however, only suitable for recorded communications. Now, another super common thing is the analysis of existing data. So my dissertation is secondary analysis. It's data that already existed. I had to merge it together, and I had to connect crime data to data about the communities in which the crime occurred. And so I had to build the data set, but the data was already collected. And this is generally what a lot of research is. In here I have a long list of data sets that you guys would be able to consider using for your research proposals or if you're doing research. So the Census Bureau has an insane amount of data. It's really time consuming to pick through, but they have so much information on characteristics of the country. The American Community Survey is part of that. That's what I used in my dissertation. I gathered data about the percentage of single-parent family homes, how many people had moved in and out of a neighborhood, what percentage of people owned their home versus rented their home. CDC has data. There's a bunch of different databases for police use of lethal violence, for mass shootings, etc. Lots of data already out there, guys. So government routinely collects and publishes compilations of data. The FBI publishes crime statistics. The Census Bureau publishes not only the 10-year census, but they publish a 1-year, a 3-year, and a 5-year American Community Survey. The Bureau of Justice Statistics, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the Office of Courts, right? What else have we looked at? We looked at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the General Social Survey. Now, if we're using agency records, we want to pay attention to match or mismatches between the unit of analysis, right? So like, is it looking at something at the state level, at the city level, at the country level? You also want to look for things like, so some of that American Community Survey data, some of it is listed as rates and some is listed as percentages. So if you're using that data together, you just want to make sure you're converting one to the other. We can move from individual level data to aggregated data where you put, so you have like individual cases, but instead of looking at them as individual cases, you kind of look at the average age, the like racial breakdown of the population as a whole. You cannot take aggregated data though, and then break it down into individualized data. So if you're collecting your own data, it's always better to collect it in as much detail as possible because you can aggregate it later, but you can't disaggregate it. Now, big data refers to these gigantic data sets that are automatically compiled from online activity. Think about Google, Amazon, everything on your phone that you've just agreed to the user agreement and they're collecting data on you, right? So like TikTok is collecting a ton of data from your phone. The National Security Agency, the NSA, is also collecting data and spying on you. So there's lots of new arenas in which we can do this unobtrusive online research. So Gong did a study in 2011 on the use of social media and how that might affect political success. There's quite a few research studies that I've seen presented where people are analyzing what is on Reddit threads. Ackland and Gibson in 2013 did a study of how political parties in different countries use their websites for different kinds of communications. There's a lot of research that looks at Twitter hashtags. We could look at Facebook posts, online dating sites. Ooh, that should say SITES. So virtually all criminal justice record keeping is a social process. It's a social production of data. It reflects decisions made by criminal justice personnel. So in terms of like what's reported in national crime data, that's a reflection of what data the government has chosen to catalog. It's not a reflection of all the data the police have on particular crimes. There's also a lot of discretion that happens here and a lot of errors in record keeping. So just showing you some stuff you can do with already collected data. This comes from the National Incident-Based Reporting Survey. Comes from my dissertation. But NIBRS is national crime data. Okay, and this is in my data set a breakdown of the age of offenders. So people who have been accused of and arrested for statutory rape, right? And you can see this is just some data that's available. Notice that some offenders are 0 years old, 1 year old, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we don't have 1 year old offenders that are like out committing statutory rape. Those are clerical errors. Somebody typed something wrong. Okay, now when you're looking at your data, you might, generally speaking, you're not going to be given what's called a clean data set. You're going to have to clean it. That means clean it up. Doesn't mean like, Windex it. And part of what I did with this is I did clean this up. Okay, so I removed any of these offenders that are 1 or 0 or 6 or 7 because those are not statutory rape offenders. We can also look at comparative and historical research. We can look at societies or some other social unit over time and in comparison with one another. This is a form of content analysis or field research or existing statistics, right? But it can help us look at why something matters historically or how it's changed historically. And for this kind of research, we can use stuff like old letters or diaries, old newspapers and magazines. A lot of those are archived. Some of them you might have to have a subscription to a paid database to get at them, but they are available. Government documents, court cases, etc.